Hi everybody. This story is called Boiled Lobsters. It's a little different from the stories I usually write, but I liked it. It was fun. See what you think. Every time I kissed Kirby Cousins, an electric thrill shot through me. Kirby had learned how to kiss the way I liked it. He descended to my neck, and I lifted my head to let him lick his way to my shoulder. Oops. My flannel shirt was in the way, so he unbuttoned all the buttons and opened it wide enough that it almost fell off me. He fondled one of my nipples as his mouth nuzzled the side of my neck. "That's nice," I whispered. We sat on the old leather living room couch, alone in the house. He had started a fire in the gas fireplace, turned the lights out, lit a couple of candles, and light jazz played in the background. Kirby had just gotten home from college, and I had come over because it had been days since we'd last met. I needed to see him, hold him, feel him near me. A car drove past the house. "Are you sure we are alone?" I said, and unbuttoned the first button of his shirt. Kirby gave me a simple answer. He kissed me, pressing inward with his naughty little tongue. I countered with mine. "I love you," I said, and unbuttoned the second button on his shirt. "I kind of guessed," Kirby said back, and kissed my nose. "I missed you so much," I said, moving my hands under his shirt, feeling the smoothness of his ribs, his back. I slipped a hand out and undid the third button on his shirt. "Tell me how much." Kirby kissed his way down my neck, down my chest, tickling the little hairs around my navel, and down. "Mom, Kirby is kissing Will's belly button." Kirby's little sister, Kelsey, stood at the open front door, holding a bag of groceries. I scrambled to button my shirt. Kirby jumped up and straightened his pants and adjusted his shirt. Mrs. Cousins stood in the doorway, behind Kelsey, holding another bag. "I've been on the road for 24 hours, and this is what I come home to?" Kelsey's eyes opened so wide I'm sure they would fall out of her head, and her hand covered her mouth, stifling a giggle. "Buttons," I whispered to Kirby. He frantically buttoned his shirt. Mrs. Cousins only shook her head a little, and her mouth puckered into a disapproving scowl. They had seen everything. "Mom," Kirby stammered, "I wasn't expecting you home until tomorrow." "Obviously." Mrs. Cousins lowered her head and frowned, glaring at me. Mrs. Cousins drove semis for a living, usually overnight runs, which meant she was on the road a couple of nights a week. She was also a big woman, 6'3". She could have played football with the guys, but they wouldn't stand a chance against her. I'd learned a long time ago she didn't put up with any crap. She kicked her husband out when she found out about his affair. She scowled, took the groceries into the kitchen, and walked back to glare at us. "Kelsey, you're staying with your friends tonight." "Mom?" Kelsey yelled. "Don't argue. It's time I had a long talk with your brother. Alone." Mrs. Cousins turned the lights on and turned the fire off. She blew out the candles. "But we were going to have pizza," Kelsey said. Mrs. Cousins reached into her pocket and pulled out a 20. "Have it with your friends. Call them. Now." Kirby took my hand and said, "Mom, don't be mad at Will. I can explain." "I have eyes." Mrs. Cousins walked into the kitchen, followed by Kelsey. "Your hand is really cold," I whispered. "So's yours. Did you ever tell your mom about us?" "Mom has a temper," Kirby said. "I never even told her I was gay." Kirby took a deep breath and leaned back on the couch, screwing his face up to keep from crying. "God, everything was so perfect tonight. Did you see her face? She's really pissed." I kept hold of his hand, feeling his cold terror flood into me. Kelsey came back, chatting on her phone. "Mom's mad at Kirby and wants me out of the house so she can yell at him. Isn't that great?" "What for?" came a little voice from the phone. "Get this," Kelsey squealed. "Mom and I got home and Kirby was making out with somebody on the couch." "Who? Remember Will? Turns out he's his boyfriend," Kelsey said, squealing. "We walked in and She went outside before we could hear the rest. Kirby tapped his foot up and down on the floor repeatedly. I placed a hand on his leg to keep it still. "I'm dead," Kirby said. "You're 19, I said. "So am I. We didn't do anything wrong." "Mom won't see it that way." Mrs. Cousins walked in on us and folded her arms. "I'm driving Kelsey to her friends. When I get back, I want to talk to both of you. Will, no sneaking out, because I know where you live. If you leave, we'll have this conversation at your parents' place. Tonight." My throat suddenly couldn't swallow, and my mouth went completely dry. "Remember, both of you, here," she said, walking out the front door and closing it firmly. A moment later, 2 car doors closed and the car drove off. Neither of us said anything for a few minutes. We only held each other's hands. "She only leaves like that to cool down," Kirby said. "She's going to kill both of us," I said. "Do you think," Kirby said, "we could find an apartment and move out in the next 10 minutes? "No," I said. "Do you think she'll forbid me from ever coming over again and demand we break up?" "She'll disown me," Kirby said. "Do you think I can move in with you?" "My parents barely tolerate me," I said. "What about campus housing? We could live together while we go to school and work." "I'm sorry about this," Kirby said. "I didn't want—" "We'll face it together." I placed an arm around Kirby's shoulders, and we sat like that for 20 minutes, maybe more. Neither one of us wanted to move. "This might be our last night together," Kirby said. "Will, I really love you." Headlights illuminated the front window. A car pulled up outside the house. The car door slammed. Footsteps came to the doorway. "Remember," I said, "you and me, we're always together." The front door opened. Mrs. Cousins came in with a pizza and a couple of grocery sacks. "Kirby, get the door." Kirby jumped up and closed it for his mom. "Do you need some help?" I asked, rising to assist. She nodded at the couch. "Sit down. Kirby and I need to talk. When we're done, it's your turn. Kirby, help me take these to the kitchen." "Yes, Mom." They left, and I tried not to overhear their conversation. "How long have you been dating Will?" Mrs. Cousins said. "Since high school," Kirby said, "but we started getting serious 6 months ago." "You never said anything." "No," Kirby said in a very small voice. "Why not?" Kirby did not answer. "Okay. Have you and Will had—" Somebody turned the TV on to block their conversation. I waited for 10 minutes. My stomach did flip-flops at every noise. I hoped I wouldn't throw up. The TV turned off, and my stomach did cartwheels. "Will," Mrs. Cousins said, "come on back." I took a deep breath and forced myself off the couch. Every step I took felt like I had a 50-pound weight strapped to each leg. When I entered the kitchen, Mrs. Cousins drummed her fingers on the table and uttered a deep, long sigh. Sit down. She gestured to the chair next to Kirby. Kirby had paled, had tears on his cheeks, and didn't look up. He had a couple of tear-stained napkins on the table before him. The unopened pizza box lay between him and his mom. A clump of bananas sat next to her, and she peeled one and ate it. I took a seat next to Kirby and grabbed the chunk of ice he called a hand. Mrs. Cousins didn't say a word. She stared at me. We love each other, I said, staring back, and have for a long time. Kirby makes me happy. Mrs. Cousins leaned forward and passed out dry napkins to each of us. Do your parents know you're gay? About your relationship with my son? I looked at Kirby. Another tear rolled down his cheek. Since I've tried to tell them, we've had a difficult relationship, I said. We never got to the part about relationships. Mrs. Cousins raised an eyebrow and said, What are your intentions with my son? One night stand? Find a sweet and little innocent thing and screw his brains out? Mom, don't. What we have is beautiful. Don't ruin it. Kirby grabbed one of the napkins and wiped his cheek. I glared back at her. We fell in love. She gave a slight, sarcastic smile. Our kids grow up and we never notice. Come again? Kirby said. Eat, she ordered, before the pizza gets cold. Kirby gripped my hand and looked at his mom. Don't try and split us up. I love Will. She looked at me. I said, I love Kirby. We're good together. Mrs. Cousins opened the pizza box and took a slice of pizza. She took a big bite and set the slice down. Between college and car payments, we're not ready to get our own place, I said. But if we have to, we'll find a place of our own. Tonight, even. We'll have to sell one of the cars, Kirby said, and rose from his chair. Give me 10 minutes. I'll go pack. Sit down. No, Kirby said, chin raised a little, but he still held my hand. You can't bully me anymore. The awkwardness dragged out, and the pizza cooled. Mrs. Cousins finished her slice, took another slice, and set it down on the napkin before her. She took a deep breath, then her eyes laser-focused on me, then on Kirby. You two have forced me to make a tough decision, Mrs. Cousins said. She pulled one of the grocery bags to the table. We are about to have the most embarrassing conversation of your lives. What do you mean? Kirby said. Take a slice before it gets cold. Mrs. Cousins pulled a brand new door handle, still in its box, from the bag. It was the kind that required keys. She opened it and pulled one of the keys out. You're changing the locks, Mom? Kirby said, squeezing my hand. You buy us pizza, and then you're kicking us out. Yep, Mrs. Cousins said. From your little room to my bigger room. Well, I can't have you and Kirby getting your own apartment. I need somebody to watch over Kelsey until I can switch to local runs. You and Will take the bigger room. I'll take the little one. We'll put the lock on the door so you won't be interrupted. Her frown turned into a funny little half-smile. Kirby collapsed back into his chair. Mom? You're okay with me and Will? Okay that I'm gay? I've suspected for years, she said, chuckling. But I never expected to walk in on you and your half-naked boyfriend making out on the couch. You do know you've given Kelsey enough gossip to keep her on the phone for the next week? I grabbed a slice and relaxed. You're inviting me to move in? I need somebody to keep Kirby and Kelsey out of trouble, Mrs. Cousins said. After you've arranged your finances and I've changed my schedule, I'll help you find your own place. Can you wait 6 months? Old Ed retires then, and I'm going to take his run. I've been afraid of you finding out for years. I thought you'd be really mad, Kirby said. I'm mad all right, Mrs. Cousins said, at myself. My own son is afraid to talk to me. I'm sorry, Mom. Mrs. Cousins got up out of her chair and walked over to Kirby. That will have to change. She hugged Kirby, and he hugged her back. Mrs. Cousins sat back down and separated 2 bananas from the bunch. I don't care who you fall in love with, as long as they make you smile. Will does. Kirby looked at me, then back at his mom. Maybe you could explain why this conversation is supposed to be so embarrassing. Sex Ed 101. We had that chat when you were 13. I'm assuming Will had one like it with his folks. Mrs. Cousins chuckled and handed each of us a banana. Will, welcome to the family. Thanks. She pulled a box of condoms from the bag. Mom? What are you doing with those? I asked. The reason Kelsey had to leave. Sex Ed 102. Mrs. Cousins smiled wickedly, then passed us both a condom. The practical guide to safe sex. Lesson 1, how to dress for the occasion. Don't eat the bananas, boys. You'll need them for practice. A tube of lube rolled out of the bag. Ignore that, Mrs. Cousins said innocently. We'll get to Sex Ed 103, the gay edition, soon enough. The heat flooded my face, and Kirby blushed so bad he looked like he had a sunburn. Mrs. Cousins laughed as she slid the pizza to us. Look at the two of you, as red as boiled lobsters. Take a slice, and let's begin.